You people need to understand that with everything going on, she can't be blamed for one stupid comment. The principal's words hit harder than any slur ever had. They hung in the air between us, thick and sour, while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and my daughter's knuckles went white around the strap of her backpack. I sat across from his tidy oak desk, my hip aching from the hard plastic chair, my face burning with a humiliation he couldn't see or refuse to. I stared at him for a second, wondering if I'd misheard. His tie was perfectly straight, his glasses spotless, his framed diplomas lined up on the wall behind him like a row of shields. On the left side of his desk lay the printed screenshots I'd brought in, a neat stack of my daughter's pain, black letters on a glowing white background. At the top of the pile, one message stood out, frozen in bright blue ink in my mind even when I closed my eyes. Did the bat taste good? Thanks a lot, you fucking freak. The first time I saw that message, it wasn't on paper. It was on my daughter's cracked phone screen at our kitchen table, her hands shaking so badly I had to take the phone away before she dropped it in her noodles. Back then, I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong. Mrs. Lee, the principal continued, folding his hands like a man about to deliver a sermon, you have to remember this was during lockdown. Everyone was scared. Her uncle had COVID, tensions were high, kids say stupid things online. Across from me, the girl sat slouched in a plastic chair, chewing the inside of her cheek, eyes fixed on a crack in the floor tile. Her hair was neatly braided. Her jeans had those fake rips that still somehow cost $50, and her sneakers were cleaner than my kitchen counters. She didn't look scared. She looked bored. Every now and then, the corner of her mouth twitched, like she was holding back a smile. My daughter, May, sat 2 chairs away from her, shoulders curled inward as if she could fold herself into nothing. Her long black hair hid half her face. I could see the edge of the mask she'd started wearing even at home, saying it was just habit now. But I knew she was hiding the way she bit her lip until it bled. I'm not talking about one message, I said, my voice coming out lower than I expected. I'm talking about months of harassment. Those weren't stupid things. They were racist. They didn't stop. She kept sending them from fake accounts. The principal sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like I was a headache he'd been dealing with all week. We investigated as much as we could. You know that. We spoke on the phone. We couldn't prove all of those accounts were hers. She used the same words, I said, the same phrases. She called my daughter a chink, told her we eat bats and dogs, blamed us for the virus. Do you really think all that came from nowhere? The girl's foot tapped once against the tile. She didn't look at me. Of course she didn't. Bullies rarely look straight at the people they're crushing. It's easier if you pretend your target is an object instead of a person. You have to understand, the principal repeated, the words smooth, practiced. We cannot control what happens outside school on personal devices. We issued a general reminder to all students about respectful communication. We counseled her. We spoke to her parents. She apologized. She never apologized to my daughter, I cut in. He hesitated. That tiny pause told me more than anything else. Well, perhaps not directly, but she understands that what she did was inappropriate. I looked at the girl. She finally lifted her eyes. They were flat, light blue, like polished glass. No fear, no shame, just calculation. Inappropriate, I repeated quietly. My hands were resting on my knees, but I could see the faint tremor in them, the way the veins stood out under my skin. Is that what we're calling it now? In my head, I heard the lunchroom again. The clatter of trays, the thick smell of fries and bleach, the echo of teenagers shouting over one another. May had been in the lunch line on the second day back to in-person classes, a flimsy plastic tray between her and the rest of the world. She told me later how the girl had walked up behind her, close enough that May could smell her bubble gum. "Are you eating bat dumpling or dog noodle?" she'd said in a thick, mocking accent, stretching the vowels, flattening the consonants, turning my mother's kitchen into a joke. The boys behind them had burst out laughing. Someone banged their tray on the metal counter. A girl at the table near the window had pulled out her phone, half hiding her smile behind it like she was checking notifications. But May saw the red light on the camera. My daughter told me she felt the whole room shrink. The warm food smell turned into something rotten. Her ears rang. Her face burned. The word freak from the old messages pressed against her skull like a thumb on a bruise. When she got home that afternoon, she tried to walk past me, eyes glued to the floor, but I heard her backpack drop in the hallway. The sound was too heavy, too final. I turned the stove off and found her standing there, shaking, and when I asked what happened, the whole story spilled out of her in gasps. That was the night we printed the screenshots. That was the night I promised her I would fix it, that adults would listen, that it wasn't her job to fight alone. Sitting in that office, listening to the principal smooth everything out with his careful, whitewashed words, I felt that promise cracking inside me. Kids tease each other, he went on as if he were explaining weather patterns, especially in middle and high school. It's unfortunate, but this isn't teasing, I said. This is racism. This is harassment. It's been going on for months, and now it's happening in your cafeteria, in front of teachers, in front of other students. He spread his hands. Our staff didn't hear the comment clearly. By the time someone realized there was a problem, the moment had passed. If we disciplined every student over one joke taken the wrong way, half the school would be in detention. I looked at my daughter. Her jaw was clenched so tight a muscle jumped in her cheek. I could see the thin red marks where she dug her nails into her wrist. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was shrinking. Each word from this man, each excuse, was pushing her a little further into herself. "You know what's funny?" I said softly. "You keep saying tensions were high, like that explains everything. But the tensions aren't high for her. They're high for us. She throws a joke and moves on. My daughter carries it into her sleep." The girl shifted in her chair. "It was just a joke," she murmured, the first words she'd said since we walked in. My head snapped toward her. "A joke," I repeated. She shrugged, eyes flicking toward the principal like she was checking whether she'd said the right thing. "I mean, everyone jokes about stuff. I didn't mean it, like seriously. I was just, whatever." Somewhere down the hallway, a bell rang. Chairs scraped, lockers slammed. A wave of voices swelled and then faded again. In this small, stale office, the air felt suddenly too thin. I realized then that I had come in here expecting something I should have known better than to expect at my age: fairness. I'd believed that if I laid out the evidence, if I showed them the words burned into our nights, someone would take our side. I'd forgotten how institutions work when the one bleeding isn't the one in power. The principal checked his watch. "We'll keep an eye on the situation," he said. "If anything else happens, May can let a teacher know. We want everyone to feel safe here. But for now, I think the best thing is to move on." Move on. I felt something harden inside me at those words, a slow, cold settling, like wet cement finding the shape of its container. As we stood to leave, the girl finally looked directly at my daughter. Her lips curled into a tiny, satisfied half-smile. It was quick, gone in a second, but I saw it. May saw it too. Her shoulders flinched. That was the moment my shame turned into something else. On the way out, we passed the cafeteria. Through the narrow glass window in the door, I could see the long steel counters, the workers in hairnets, the clusters of kids at their usual tables. The same space where my daughter had been turned into a punchline. Ahead of us, the girl broke away from her mother and drifted toward a group of friends by the vending machines. They leaned in close, whispering. Then their eyes flicked toward us, and a couple of them laughed. My hand tightened around the strap of my purse. I heard my own voice before I'd fully decided to speak. "Hey," I called out. She turned, eyebrows raised, that smirk already forming, as if she couldn't wait to see what the sensitive Asian mom would say. I took a step closer, close enough to see the yellow tinge on her teeth, the chipped edge of a canine, the faint stain on the collar of her t-shirt, close enough to remember what May had told me in a small, ashamed voice the night before. She lives in a trailer, Mom. Everyone knows. She always smells like cigarette smoke. Her teeth are gross. I had told my daughter not to say things like that. I had told her we were better than that. Standing there in that hallway, with the principal's excuses still ringing in my ears and this girl smirking at my child, I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. I felt my daughter's fingers brush the back of my hand, a small, desperate touch, like she was asking me not to make it worse. Instead, I lifted my chin and opened my mouth, about to show that girl, just once, how it felt to be stripped bare in front of an audience. Mrs. Lee. The voice cut through the hallway just as the words were lining up on my tongue like bullets. I turned and saw the principal standing in the doorway of his office, hand on the frame, eyes flicking from me to the girl and back again. For a second, nobody moved. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The vending machine hummed. Somewhere behind us, a locker door slammed. "Yes?" I said. He gave a tight smile, the kind adults wear when they're pretending everything is under control. "I think it's best if we all take a breath. We don't want any more misunderstandings, do we?" The girl's friends snickered softly. One of them muttered something under her breath that sounded like overreacting, and another rolled her eyes. The girl herself just tilted her head, that same little half-smile twitching at the corner of her mouth. I felt May tense beside me, her fingers curled into the back of my coat. That small grip did what the principal's words couldn't. It pulled me back from the edge. I swallowed the insult I'd been about to throw. It tasted sour on the way down. "No," I said finally. "We don't." The principal nodded like he'd just solved world peace. "Good. Why don't you and May head home for today, Mrs. Lee? We'll keep monitoring things here." My daughter's eyes slid to mine, wide and uncertain. I could tell she wanted me to argue, to demand consequences, to force him to say the word racist out loud in this hallway. Instead, I said the only thing that seemed possible in that moment. "Come on," I murmured to her. "Get your things." As we walked away, I felt the girl's gaze on my back. I didn't have to turn around to know she was smirking again. People like her didn't need much imagination. They were powered by immunity, not creativity. In the car, May stared out the passenger window, her mask dangling forgotten from one ear. The parking lot was half empty, yellow buses lined up like patient animals. A gust of wind pushed a fast food cup across the asphalt. "You were going to say something to her," she said quietly. "Weren't you?" I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles went pale. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" I watched a group of kids cross between the buses, laughing, shoving each other. None of them looked over at us. "Because the person who should have stopped her was standing right there," I said, "and he chose to stop me instead." May's jaw tightened. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, as if she were trying to make herself smaller inside the already small seat. "I hate this school," she whispered. I didn't tell her I understood. I didn't tell her about the way the principal's eyes had slid right past the printouts on his desk and landed instead on the word tensions. I didn't tell her how many times I'd watched white people rearrange reality into something more comfortable for themselves. I just started the engine. On the drive home, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. May glanced at the screen. "It's the school app," she said. "Notification from the district." "Read it," I said. She sighed and unlocked it. Her voice flattened as she read. "In light of recent events, we would like to remind all students and families to practice kindness in their words and actions. This is a stressful time for everyone. We discourage singling out any group or individual for blame. Let's support each other." She stopped, lips twisting. They didn't even say what happened. Of course they didn't. That would require choosing a side. I exhaled slowly through my nose. Keep reading. Is there more? She scrolled. It says, students who experience or witness harassment can report it confidentially, and that the school does not tolerate bullying of any kind. The car's turn signal clicked as I changed lanes. I guess you must exist in a different school than they do, I said. She didn't laugh. The silence settled between us like fog. At home, she disappeared into her room as soon as we walked through the door. I heard the soft thud of her backpack hitting the floor, then nothing. No music, no TikTok sounds, just a thick, hungry quiet. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the counter where her phone had rested that first night, screen glowing with slurs. The kettle began to whistle on the stove, shrill and insistent. I turned it off and didn't make tea. My own phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. Subject, follow-up on today's conversation. The principal's name sat below the subject line, polite as ever. I opened it, my thumb hovering just above the screen. Dear Mrs. Lee, thank you for coming in today to discuss your concerns. As we mentioned, we are committed to fostering an inclusive environment for all students. However, it is important to remember that this is a challenging time for everyone. We ask that you encourage May to respond calmly and avoid escalating situations with her peers. Misunderstandings can happen easily, and we want to ensure all students feel respected. I stopped reading. The words blurred. The core of the message was clear. Don't make trouble. Don't expect us to name the problem. Don't ask us to confront the people who look like us. Ask your daughter to be smaller, quieter, more understanding of the girl who mocked her. A door clicked down the hallway. May emerged, wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, sleeves covering her hands. She hovered in the doorway of the kitchen. Are they going to do anything? She asked. I thought of the email, of the word misunderstandings, of for everyone. No, I said. Not really. Something in her face crumpled and then rebuilt itself in real time. It was like watching concrete set. I wanted to grab it, to smooth it back into softness, but I was too slow. So that's it then, she said. She just gets to keep doing it? Not if I can help it, I said automatically. How? May's eyes flashed. You already tried. You brought them the messages. You talked to them. You did everything right. They don't care. Her voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed and looked away, blinking hard. I stepped closer, reaching for her hand, but she stepped back just a fraction of an inch. It was enough. It's not that they don't care, I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. It's that they don't want to see. Seeing would mean doing something uncomfortable, and they've decided your pain isn't worth being uncomfortable. She rubbed her sleeve over her face. So what am I supposed to do? Just stand there while she makes those jokes? Let everyone laugh? The question hung in the air, raw and fragile. I didn't have a good answer. The ones I wanted to give. Stand up for yourself. Tell a teacher. Speak the truth. Already felt like lies in my mouth. Right now, I said slowly, you stay away from her as much as you can. You stay close to the kids who aren't laughing. And you tell me every single time anything happens. I mean it, every time. She stared at me for a long moment. What's the point? She whispered finally. The words landed like a slap I couldn't block, not because she aimed them at me, but because I recognized them. I'd thought the same thing more times than I could count in my life. The point was supposed to be that adults stepped in, that institutions protected the vulnerable, that rules meant something. In this house, the point had become survival. That night at dinner, May barely ate. She pushed rice around her plate, pretending to listen while her father talked about infection rates and vaccine rollouts. When he asked how school was, she said, "Fine," without looking up. I watched the way her chopsticks trembled in her fingers. I watched the way she flinched when a notification sound went off on his phone. I watched my husband accept "fine" like it was a complete answer. After she went to her room, I opened my laptop at the table. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Maybe other parents' stories, maybe legal options, maybe language strong enough to pierce the school's soft, padded emails. What I found first was a local parent forum. A thread had already started. Anyone else concerned about tensions at school? I clicked, expecting complaints about masks and distancing. There were those, of course. But halfway down the page, a comment caught my eye. My daughter told me there was an incident in the lunchroom today. Some Asian girl got offended by a joke, and now everyone's making a big deal out of it. Kids need to toughen up. It's not racist to mention where the virus came from. We're all stressed. My stomach dropped. The username was just a generic nickname, but I didn't need a real name to know whose parent it probably was. Underneath, another comment had replied with a laughing emoji and, "Ugh, people are so sensitive these days. Poor kids can't even joke around without someone crying racism." I stared at those words for a long time, the room around me shrinking, the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence like a silent dare. They weren't just erasing what happened. They were rewriting it, turning my daughter into the problem again. I closed the laptop harder than I meant to. The sound made a glass on the table jump. From down the hallway, May's door opened a crack. "Mom," she called, "are you okay?" I forced my voice to steady. "I'm fine," I lied. I wasn't fine. I was cornered. Not just by a 13-year-old girl with a cruel mouth, but by an entire system that would rather protect her comfort than my daughter's dignity. The next day, when May walked back into that school building, I watched her from the car until the doors closed behind her. Her shoulders were squared, but I could see the tightness in her steps. I thought I'd reached the limit of how bad it could get. I was wrong. Because that afternoon, an email arrived from the vice principal requesting a meeting. Not about the girl who had mocked my child in front of half the cafeteria, about my daughter. The vice principal's email sat unopened for nearly 20 minutes before I found the courage to click it. By then, May had retreated into her room again, the door closed, the faint hum of her small desk fan seeping into the hallway like a tired sigh. I sat alone in the kitchen, elbows on the table, my untouched cup of tea growing colder by the minute. I read the message twice, then a third time. It was written in that careful, sanitized tone educators use when they don't want to offend anyone, but also don't want to take responsibility. We would like to discuss concerns about May's recent interactions with peers, not the harassment she endured, not the months of racist messages, not the cafeteria humiliation, concerns about her. The familiar ache settled in my chest, the one I'd carried for decades without meaning to. The quiet weight of knowing that when something went wrong, we would always be the ones asked to explain ourselves. I leaned back in the chair and looked around the kitchen. Our kitchen, the one I'd built piece by piece over years. The smell of ginger still lingered from the stir-fry I'd made earlier. A small ceramic bowl sat on the counter, chipped at the rim, holding 2 cloves of garlic and a single dried chili. The light above the stove flickered faintly. It had been doing that for months, ever since the storm last winter. The bowl was one of my emotional anchors, though I didn't have language for such things. It had belonged to my mother. She used it every evening in the apartment where I grew up, tapping the garlic against the rim before peeling it, humming low under her breath. Back then, the bowl seemed indestructible, as if it knew too much about our lives to break. I picked it up now and ran my thumb along the chipped edge. The ceramic felt cool, smooth except for that one rough spot. My mother had given it to me when I moved out, pressing it into my hands without ceremony. "Use it," she said, "so your kitchen never feels empty." I hadn't understood the meaning then. I understood it now. Kitchens fill with more than food. They fill with fears, disappointments, whispered prayers. They hold the weight of everything a mother tries to swallow so her child doesn't have to. I set the bowl down gently and let the memories unfold the way they wanted to, not rushing them, not pushing them away. When I first arrived in this country, I was 22 and too thin. My suitcase had 1 pair of extra shoes, 2 notebooks, a sweater that smelled like my father's cigarettes, and a single envelope containing the money my parents had scraped together from friends and cousins. The airport felt enormous, its ceilings too bright, the English announcements echoing like scattered marbles I couldn't catch, no matter how hard I tried. I remembered the fluorescent lights flickering above me in the customs line, a scent of fried food drifting from somewhere I couldn't see, and a cold draft that slipped under the cuff of my coat. That same kind of cold lived in school offices now, the kind that made people like us shrink even when we tried not to. I worked 2 jobs back then, one at a laundromat, one at a dim little restaurant where I washed dishes in the back until my hands cracked from hot water and cheap soap. On the nights I didn't have work, I studied English until my eyes burned. I kept a dictionary beside my mattress, underlining words I didn't know, repeating them softly into the blankets so my roommates wouldn't wake. Sometimes the memories returned with smells rather than images, the metallic scent of wet coins from the laundromat register, the sharp bite of vinegar from the mop water, the heavy sweetness of old rice soaking in stainless steel pots, and always the scent of garlic and ginger, the first things my mother taught me to cook with, the things that made any space feel a little less foreign. It took years before I stopped flinching at certain tones of voice, before I stopped apologizing for taking up hallway space, before I realized that no matter how perfect my English became, some people would still speak to me like I was borrowing the language. May never knew that part of my life. I never wanted her to. When she was born, the nurse wrapped her in a soft yellow blanket, and for the first time in years, I felt something inside me loosen. Her cry was small but fierce, like she was already arguing with the world. I held her close and breathed in the scent of new skin, milk, and possibilities. From then on, everything I did was for her. The long shifts, the late-night paperwork, the savings tucked into envelopes in the back of my dresser, the careful lunches I packed each morning, slicing apples into neat little wedges the way she liked them, tucking a handwritten note under her thermos. "You're brave," I wrote once when she was 7, afraid of a class presentation. "You're stronger than you think." I kept writing messages like that for years, small scraps of encouragement folded into her lunches, hidden under her pillow, slipped into her backpack. Those notes were another emotional anchor, though I didn't realize it until now. Paper soft from handling, ink sometimes smudged, each one a reminder of the part of me that refused to let the world turn her small. But the world had a way of seeping through the cracks. When she started middle school, she stopped asking me to braid her hair in the mornings. She stopped leaving her notebooks open on the table, stopped telling me about the silly jokes her friends made or the things her teacher said that made her laugh. Instead, her words grew shorter, lighter, like she was afraid that if she set them down too heavily, they might reveal how much she was carrying. The first time she came home with tear stains dried on her cheeks, she said it was just a bad day. The second time, she said nothing at all. I found her in her room later that night, staring at her phone as if it were a weapon. I didn't know then what messages she had already been receiving. I didn't know how long she had been blocking one account only to see another appear. If I had known, I would have taken screenshots sooner. I would have marched into that school months earlier. But she kept it quiet, protecting me in that way children sometimes do, imagining their silence will spare us. I learned young what silence costs. My father worked in a factory back in Guangzhou. He used to come home with his shoulders hunched and his hands raw from chemicals they promised were safe. When a supervisor yelled at him once, accusing him of mishandling materials he had never even touched, my father said nothing, because men who complained didn't last long, because his job fed us, because his silence protected us. But I remembered the way his fingers trembled when he tied his shoes the next morning, the way his jaw flexed when he buttoned his shirt, the way he carried that humiliation like it was stitched into the fabric of his coat. I didn't want that for my daughter, yet somehow, without meaning to, she had inherited it anyway. I stood up from the table and walked to her bedroom door. The hallway carpet felt soft under my feet. A faint scent of lavender drifted from the laundry basket. Another anchor, one I didn't choose but had grown attached to. I knocked softly. "May?" A pause, then her muffled voice. "Yeah? Can I come in?" A rustle of blankets. "Okay." Her room was dim except for the soft glow of her desk lamp. She sat cross-legged on her bed, hoodie pulled over her head, sleeves covering her hands. Her eyes looked too old for her face. I sat beside her. The mattress dipped slightly under my weight. "You know," I said gently, "when I was your age, I didn't talk about things that hurt me either." She didn't look at me yet, but her shoulders dropped a fraction. "I thought being quiet would make them stop," I continued. "But silence only teaches cruel people that you will absorb everything they throw at you." Her voice cracked. "So what do I do?" "That's what we're going to figure out," I said, "together." She leaned her head against my shoulder. The weight of it was small, warm, painfully familiar. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed in the scent of her shampoo, coconut and something sweet, something young. It reminded me how fragile the line was between childhood and the things that try to take it away. "We'll meet with the vice principal," I said quietly. "I don't know what they're expecting from us, but we'll listen, and then we'll decide our next step." She nodded against my arm, though I wasn't sure she believed me. I wasn't sure I believed myself. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I walked into the living room and turned on the lamp beside the couch. A pool of warm light spread across the rug. I sat down with my old photo albums, thick, heavy things with fading edges, and opened them one by one. There I was at 23, standing in front of the laundromat where I worked, holding a mop in one hand, smiling like the world hadn't yet worn me down. There I was at 25, with May's father, our apartment barely furnished, his arm slung around my waist, both of us too tired and too hopeful to understand everything waiting for us. There I was at 30, holding a toddler May in my lap, her cheeks round, her eyes bright, her fingers curled around the sleeve of my sweater. I touched the image lightly. The glossy paper felt cold. Back then, she didn't know anything about hate. Back then, when someone looked at her in public, it was because she was adorable, not because she looked like the wrong person at the wrong time in history. Sometimes I wished I could go back, lift that little girl into my arms, and carry her somewhere the world couldn't reach, somewhere the words bat-eater and dog noodle had no meaning. Somewhere the sound of laughter didn't make her flinch, but time doesn't work that way. It only moves forward, dragging us with it whether we're ready or not. I closed the albums and exhaled slowly. The room felt too quiet, too expectant, as if the walls were waiting for me to accept something I already knew. The meeting tomorrow would not fix everything. The school would not suddenly see us. The girl who bullied my daughter would not magically transform into someone compassionate, but something inside me was shifting anyway, a slow gathering weight, a clarity thickening like storm clouds. I wasn't sure yet what it would become, but I felt it there, steady and patient. I stood, turned off the lamp, and let the house fall back into darkness. And in the silence, I could still feel the chipped edge of my mother's ceramic bowl under my thumb, the anchor that reminded me who I was before the world tried to make me smaller. The vice principal's office had a way of swallowing sound. Even the click of the door behind us faded too quickly, absorbed by the bland beige walls and the soft carpet that reminded me of an old motel. As May and I sat down across from his desk, I could feel her shrinking beside me, her shoulder brushing mine only when she inhaled too deeply. He folded his hands on top of a thin folder and cleared his throat. The fluorescent lights above us flickered, then steadied. "Thank you both for coming," he said, his tone practiced, polished, unmistakably calm in a way that irritated me more the longer we sat there. "We want to address some concerns about what happened yesterday." My heart beat once, hard, but I forced my voice to remain level. "Good. Let's talk about the racist remark directed at my daughter. He shifted slightly in his chair. Well, what we want to focus on today is the overall conflict. There are differing accounts. I kept my gaze on him. What account differs from a girl mocking my daughter's race in the cafeteria? He gave a soft, almost sympathetic smile. Some students felt it was meant as a joke. May lowered her eyes, her fingers curling tightly around the edge of her sleeve. I leaned forward. A joke? At whose expense? Children sometimes say things impulsively, he replied. We have to consider context. I felt the air thin. Context, I repeated slowly. You're telling me there's a context where mocking someone's ethnicity is acceptable? His expression didn't change. No, of course not. But intent matters. Several students said she didn't sound malicious. May whispered, she did. He didn't acknowledge it. Instead, he turned a page in the folder, pretending to review something important. We're concerned about May's reaction afterward. My body went still. Her reaction? He looked up again. We were told that she responded in a way that escalated tensions. May's voice cracked. I didn't respond. I left. He tapped a pen lightly against the desk. Sometimes body language communicates more than words. If other students perceived hostility, that's something we need to address. I stared at him, stunned at how effortlessly he shifted responsibility. She was humiliated. And you're reprimanding her for not reacting the right way? His jaw tightened for a moment, but he smoothed it out. No one is reprimanding anyone. We just want to make sure she understands how to de-escalate. Something inside me trembled. I wasn't sure if it was anger or disbelief. He continued, kids are under tremendous stress this year. Things can be misinterpreted. I could hear May's breath quickening beside me. Her sleeve slipped, revealing the red crescent marks where she'd been digging her nails into her wrist. I don't think she misinterpreted anything, I said. She's been dealing with harassment for months. She blocked account after account. She endured slurs. The only thing she's guilty of is trying to survive. The vice principal exhaled through his nose. Well, we can't prove who sent those messages. That's because you didn't try, I said quietly. He blinked, then gave me the same neutral smile he'd worn since we arrived. We're asking both students to be more mindful moving forward. Mindful. The words scraped down my spine. He slid a paper toward me, an incident form printed on cheap-looking white stock. We'd like you to sign this to confirm you've discussed the issue. I didn't touch it. After the meeting, we stepped into the hallway. The bell had just rung, and students drifted past us in noisy clusters. Lockers slammed, backpacks thudded against shoulders. Conversations overlapped in messy waves. May walked stiffly toward her locker. Two girls stood nearby, leaning close enough for their whispers to find us. I heard her mom made everything this huge deal, one said. The other giggled. They're so dramatic. I'd die of embarrassment. May's hand faltered on the combination lock. The metal clicked wrong, and she tried again with shaking fingers. The girls didn't lower their voices. Seriously, if someone joked about me, I'd laugh it off. Not everything is racist. The locker finally opened. May grabbed her books without looking at me. Her breath trembled in her throat. I should go to class, she murmured. Before I could respond, she slipped away into the crowd. Students parted around her without seeing her. Not the real her, just the outline of someone they'd already decided was overreacting. I stood alone in the hallway for several seconds, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant and teenage sweat. Then I turned to leave, but as I walked toward the exit, a voice carried down the corridor. She made me sound like some monster, the girl was saying. I literally said one joke, one. Another voice chimed in. Yeah, and now everyone's acting like she's the victim. They rounded the corner before I did, their backs to me. The girl who had mocked my daughter gestured animatedly, her ponytail swinging, her voice bright with indignation. I swear her mom looked like she wanted to scream or cry, I can't tell. Laughter followed, Loud, unfiltered, careless. Something in me tightened the way fabric shrinks in a dryer, slowly at first, then all at once. For a moment, I imagined stepping into that circle of girls, imagined asking them what part of racial humiliation was funny, but the words wouldn't come. Not because I couldn't say them, but because I could already see how they'd respond. They'd look at me the way adults at the school had already looked at us, with mild discomfort and a dismissiveness sharpened by entitlement. So I turned and walked out of the building instead. When we got home later that afternoon, May went straight to her room again. Her door closed with a soft finality that felt louder than a slam. I hesitated outside it, then walked away, giving her space to breathe in whatever way she could. As I stood in the kitchen, the late afternoon light slanted across the counter, illuminating a thin layer of dust near the microwave. I reached for it with a cloth, wiping it in slow circles. Even in silence, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. The front door opened. My husband stepped in, loosening his tie. "How did it go?" he asked, placing his keys in the bowl by the entryway. I gave him the details. The meeting, the whispers, the vice principal's insistence on context, May's locked jaw, her trembling hands. He sighed. "Maybe things will settle down soon." I stared at him. Settle down? She was targeted. He rubbed his forehead. "I know, but sometimes the more attention we draw to it, the more kids will push back. If we just leave it alone..." "She'll keep getting hurt," I said. "That's what leaving it alone means." He didn't respond. He walked into the living room and sank onto the couch, eyes on his phone. The silence widened between us, stretching across the room until it touched the corners of the house. Later that night, I noticed the glow under May's door. A faint light, barely visible. I knocked gently. "It's me," I said. "Can I come in?" She didn't answer at first, but eventually I heard the soft scrape of her chair. I stepped in. Her laptop was open on her desk, illuminating her face with a pale blue glow. She closed the screen quickly, but not before I saw a search result. "Why are Asian kids bullied in school?" My breath caught. She tugged her sleeves over her hands. "I wasn't doing anything." I sat on her bed and patted the space beside me. "Come here." She hesitated, then sat, slowly, carefully, as though afraid her body might reveal too much. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" I asked, stunned. "For causing trouble, for making you go to the school, for everything." My throat tightened. "You didn't cause anything. You're the one who's been hurt." She shook her head. "People are saying I'm trying to get her in trouble, that I'm overreacting, that I made it bigger than it was." Her breathing quickened. "What if they're right? What if I'm dramatic?" "You're not dramatic," I said firmly. "You're scared and tired, and you've been handling something no child should have to." She covered her face with her hands. "Everyone hates me now." I wrapped my arm around her and pulled her gently against me, feeling her small, fragile weight collapse into my side. Her tears soaked into my shirt. Each one stung like a burn. "It won't always be like this," I murmured. But even as I said it, something inside me knew the truth. It might get worse before it gets better. When she finally fell asleep that night, curled tightly on her side, I stepped quietly into the hallway. The house was dark and still. I walked toward the kitchen, needing a glass of water or maybe something else. Air, space, clarity. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from an unknown number. "Tell your daughter to keep her mouth shut." I stared at the screen. Another message appeared immediately after. "Before someone shuts it for her." My pulse hammered. The refrigerator hummed in the background, the only sound in the room. I swallowed hard, tasting metal. Then a third message arrived. "You people don't know when to stop." The kitchen lights flickered once, barely noticeable, but the sudden dimming made my heart lurch. I felt, for the first time, not just anger or fear, but something colder, something sharper, something that told me this was no longer simply about school or jokes or misunderstandings. It was about control, and someone believed they had it. The house felt too quiet as I stood there, the glow of my phone lighting my face. Then I heard a soft creak from the hallway. May's bedroom door. Opening. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's something on my phone." I turned toward her, my stomach dropping. "What is it?" I asked. She held up her screen with shaking hands. It was the same number, the same message, but hers had one more line. "I know where you sit at lunch." The room tilted. My breath stilled, and for the first time, I felt the edges of something unraveling faster than I could hold it. The next morning, I didn't send May to school. She sat at the kitchen table in her pajama pants, knees drawn up, fingers wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. The steam rose in thin, disappearing ribbons. Her eyes were swollen from crying. My phone lay between us, screen dark, but I could still see the messages burned into it. "I know where you sit at lunch before someone shuts it for her. You people don't know when to stop." I had deleted them after taking screenshots, but it didn't matter. The words were imprinted somewhere deeper now. "I'm not going back there," May said, voice hoarse. "I know," I answered. It was the first time I'd said those words out loud, the first time I wasn't trying to convince her to endure one more day. Something in my voice must have sounded different because she looked up, startled. "You're not going to make me?" she asked. I held her gaze. "No." She searched my face for a long moment like she was trying to see if I was lying. When she didn't find anything, she looked down at her mug again. A slow, shaky breath left her lungs. My phone buzzed. I flinched before I could stop myself. A new email. The subject line flashed from the screen. "Attendance concern Emmy Lee." I opened it. The vice principal, again. "We noticed May is absent today. Given recent issues, it is important she attend classes consistently and demonstrate resilience. Avoiding school may reinforce negative patterns. Please encourage her to return and handle conflicts appropriately." Resilience. Handle conflicts appropriately. I stared at the words until they blurred. My thumb shook as I scrolled down. We remain committed to supporting all students. However, if May continues to be absent without valid medical reasons, we may need to involve the truancy officer. That was it. Something inside me snapped. Not like a fragile twig, but like a rope that had been fraying for years, finally giving way. They were threatening my child because she refused to return to the place that was hurting her. "Mom," May whispered. "What is it?" I placed the phone on the table, screen up, and slid it toward her. "Read it." She scanned the message. With every line, the color drained from her face. By the time she reached the end, her hand was shaking so badly the phone rattled on the wood. "So it's my fault," she said. Again. "No," I replied. "Not this time." A strange calm settled over me, not the numbness of the past few days, but a cold, clear stillness, the kind that comes when you finally accept that no one is coming to save you. I stood up, went to the counter, and pulled open the drawer where we kept old paperwork, warranties, reports cards, insurance forms. At the very back, folded in half, was the folder from when we enrolled May in the district. Behind it, the faded manila packet from when we moved into this house, full of mortgage documents and closing disclosures. I took them both out and set them on the table. May watched me, confused. "What are you doing?" "Putting everything in one place," I said. "For what?" I met her eyes. "We're not asking them for help anymore. We're telling them what's going to happen." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "They want resilience?" I said. "They're going to see it, just not the way they expect." I sat down and opened my laptop. The keys felt different under my fingers now, less like tools, more like weapons I hadn't realized I had. I searched for the district superintendent's email, then the school board, then the state's Department of Education. I opened tabs for all of them. "Mom," May said softly, "they're not going to listen." "Maybe not at first," I answered, "but they're going to hear us." I plugged my phone into the laptop and transferred the screenshots, the racist messages from lockdown, the cafeteria threats, the late-night texts telling her to keep her mouth shut. I dug through my email for the school's previous responses, each one carefully vague, each one refusing to name what was happening. On the screen, side by side, the pattern became impossible to ignore. She leaned forward, reading over my shoulder. "You're sending this to them?" "Yes," I said, "and more." I started drafting a letter, not the polite, cautious emails I'd sent before, full of softened edges and careful deference. This one was different. I listed dates. I quoted their own words back to them. I described specific incidents in the cafeteria, the hallways, online. I wrote about the night I found my daughter shaking on the floor of her bedroom. I wrote about the messages telling her someone knew where she sat at lunch. "You can't say it like that," May whispered once when I typed the sentence. "Your failure to intervene has taught my daughter that her safety matters less than her harasser's comfort." "Why not?" I asked. "They'll get mad." "Good," I said, "they should." The realization hung between us for a moment. I wasn't smoothing anything over anymore. I wasn't translating our pain into something easier to digest. I was naming things exactly as they were. For years, I had believed that if I was reasonable, people would listen. That if I came with small requests and gentle words, they might meet me halfway. I had been wrong. They mistook our politeness for weakness. They mistook our patience for permission. I finished the letter to the superintendent and copied it, sent it to the school board, to the state complaint line. Then I opened one more tab, the local news station's website. "Mom," May said, almost a warning. "They might ignore us," I said, "but they pay attention to their reputation." I didn't send anything there, not yet, but I kept the tab open, a quiet possibility glowing at the top of the screen. I printed the screenshots and the emails, stacking them neatly. The printer hummed on the counter, spitting out sheets that felt heavier than paper. Evidence, I thought. Not in a courtroom yet, but something close. "Are you scared?" May asked. "Yes," I said honestly, "but I'm more scared of what happens if we do nothing." She swallowed. "What if they say I'm lying or exaggerating?" "That's why we keep everything," I said, tapping the stack. "So they can't pretend this is just your word against someone else's. So they can't erase what's happened." She was silent for a long time. Then slowly she reached toward the pile, fingertips grazing the top page. "What if it still doesn't work?" she whispered. I thought of my father, coming home from the factory with humiliation stitched into his shoulders. I thought of my mother, pressing that chipped ceramic bowl into my hands, telling me to keep my kitchen from feeling empty. I thought of every time in my life when I had chosen silence because speaking felt dangerous. "It's going to work for me," I said quietly, "because I can't carry this the way they want me to anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, not the raw, helpless kind from the night before, but a different kind, confused, searching. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I'm mad for you." The distinction settled in the room like a new piece of furniture, taking up space it should have occupied all along. There was a knock at the front door. We both froze. 3 short raps, not tentative, not aggressive, official. My heart climbed into my throat. I wasn't expecting anyone. My husband was at work. The neighbors usually texted before dropping by. "Stay here," I said to May. She grabbed my wrist. "Who is it?" "I'll find out." I walked to the door, every step measured. The peephole showed a blurred shape. Dark jacket, light-colored clipboard, a lanyard. "Mrs. Lee," a man's voice called, "from the school district. I'd like to speak with you about some concerns." My hand hovered over the lock. They had moved faster than I expected. And suddenly, I realized they hadn't come because they were worried about her safety. They had come because they had finally noticed I'd stopped being quiet. I didn't open the door right away. The man outside shifted his weight, the sound of his shoes scraping lightly against the welcome mat. Through the peephole, I saw him glance down at his clipboard, then back toward the street as if checking whether anyone else was watching. "Mrs. Lee," he called again, softer this time. "I'm here on behalf of the district. I'd appreciate a quick conversation if you have a moment." A quick conversation. That was what they always wanted, something brief, controlled, spoken in low tones so no one had to feel uncomfortable. But there was nothing quick about what had happened to my daughter, nothing quick about months of humiliation, nothing quick about the dread in her voice when she said she didn't want to go back. Still, I opened the door halfway. May hovered several feet behind me, just out of the man's sight, but I could feel her breath catch as I unlatched the lock. The man gave a polite smile. He looked mid-40s, neatly dressed, carrying the bland professionalism of someone who visited homes often but never stayed long enough to understand them. His badge hung from his lanyard, the district logo shining faintly in the morning light. "Thank you," he said. "I won't take up too much of your time." "What is this regarding?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He lifted the clipboard. "We received inquiries, several actually, flagging your concerns. Before the district proceeds, we wanted to clarify certain details. An in-person conversation is often the most productive for resolving misunderstandings." There it was again. Misunderstandings. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me just enough that May couldn't be seen. The air was cool, with a faint smell of damp earth from last night's rain. The man's smile stayed fixed in place. "Can we talk inside?" he asked. "No," I said. "Here is fine." His smile flickered just a little before settling back into place. "Of course. I'm hoping to better understand the context of your concerns. Sometimes written complaints can sound more urgent than the situation actually is." The shift was subtle, but I heard it clearly. "Tone it down." I crossed my arms. "My daughter was harassed. She received threats. I sent documentation." "Yes," he said carefully. "I did see that. The district takes all reports seriously. However, we do have to ensure that what we're responding to is actionable." I felt something cold press against my ribs. Which part wasn't actionable? The racial slurs? The threats? The school's refusal to intervene? He lowered his voice, leaning slightly toward me. "Mrs. Lee, when a complaint goes to the superintendent, it becomes a formal matter. These processes can be difficult for everyone involved. It helps when families work with the school directly instead of escalating prematurely." Prematurely. My jaw tightened. "We tried working with the school. They dismissed us." He glanced down at his clipboard again. "That's not what their notes reflect." Of course it wasn't. People in power rarely wrote down their indifference. "I'd like to understand," he continued, "why May responded so strongly to what some students perceived as a harmless joke. We have to consider all perspectives." A harmless joke. All perspectives. I stared at him for a long moment, the morning light catching in the faint lines at the corner of his eyes. He wasn't malicious. He wasn't cruel. He was simply part of a system that had learned how to keep peace by maintaining imbalance. But I was done being polite. "You came here," I said slowly, "to fix the problem of a mother refusing to stay quiet, not the problem happening to her daughter." He opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't step back. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm compiling everything: emails, messages, documentation. I'm requesting a copy of all incident reports related to my daughter. I'm filing a formal record of every meeting, and I'm asking for the district's written policy on racial harassment, including consequences outlined for repeated offenses." He blinked. "We can provide some of that, but certain documents require—" "I know what they require," I said. "I also know my rights." The man shifted again, the practiced veneer slipping. Mrs. Lee, please remember we're all trying to work toward a solution. If things escalate publicly, it can create unnecessary tension in the community. I'm aware, I said. That's why I'm collecting evidence. A long silence stretched between us. He finally cleared his throat. I'll note your position. He stepped back from the porch. Expect follow-up communication. He didn't look me in the eye as he walked down the steps. The moment he turned the corner, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. When I went back inside, May was standing in the hallway, hands clasped together, her eyes full of questions. What did he want? She asked. To warn me, I said, and to see if I would back down. She swallowed. Will you? Not anymore. She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of those words. I didn't tell her that my hands were trembling when I closed the door. I didn't tell her how easily institutional calm could turn into institutional threat. She didn't need that fear added to the pile she was already carrying. After lunch, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open and every document spread out before me. Screenshots printed in neat rows, email threads, attendance forms, the enrollment paperwork, the policies I downloaded from the district website. May watched from the other side of the table, curled in a blanket, silent but alert. Why are you doing all this today? She asked. Because they moved first, I answered, and now we have to move carefully. I opened a new document and began typing, my fingers steady even though my stomach wasn't. A timeline. Every incident, every message, every failure to act, a map of the quiet harm they'd allowed to grow. As I typed, May's breathing slowed, as if the sound of the keys gave her something solid to anchor herself to. I listed dates from months earlier, recalling the nights she'd gone to her room too quickly, the mornings she'd avoided the mirror, the stories she'd nearly told but swallowed instead. The more I wrote, the clearer the pattern became. Mom? She said softly. Yes? Do you think they're going to punish me? I looked up. No. They'll try to question you. They'll try to make you feel uncertain, but they're not going to punish you. Her eyes dropped. I'm scared. I know, I said. That's why we prepare. Later, I texted her father, asking him to come home early. When he arrived, I showed him the messages, again, and this time he didn't look away. The concern on his face was sharper now, edged with something heavier. He sat down across from me. What do we do next? We request video footage, I said. Documentation of the cafeteria incident, hallway cameras, logs of online reports. We file everything officially. He hesitated. Will they give us all that? They'll give us what they think we'll accept, I said, but we're not accepting anything quietly. He nodded slowly. The house felt tense in a new way, not fearful but bracing, like the air before a storm. That night, after May went to bed, I made a folder on my computer labeled Records. Then I made a second one called Backup. I uploaded everything to a cloud drive. I printed duplicates of the duplicates. Every step made me feel more awake. Every step made the district's visit feel less like intimidation and more like confirmation that I was getting close to something they wished I hadn't. By midnight, I was exhausted. I stood at the sink, rinsing my hands under warm water. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. Then, another email from the vice principal. Subject, important update regarding May Lee. I opened it slowly, my stomach tightening as if preparing for impact. Mrs. Lee, we have received reports from multiple students expressing concern that May be contributing to a hostile environment by misinterpreting peer interactions. It is critical that we meet to discuss appropriate behavioral expectations moving forward. Appropriate behavioral expectations. I gripped the edge of the counter. At that exact moment, a soft cry echoed from the hallway, May calling out from her sleep. I rushed to her room. She was sitting upright in bed, clutching her blanket, eyes wide, breath ragged. "Mom," she whispered. "Was someone in the hallway?" I froze. The house was dark, still, silent. "Why do you think that?" I asked. She swallowed hard. I heard something, like footsteps. I sat beside her and wrapped my arms around her. You're safe, I said. I'm here. But as I held her, listening to the faint hum of the street outside, I felt it. A shift in the air, a wrongness I couldn't place, a sense that something had crossed from fear into intrusion. Mom? She whispered again. Are you sure we're safe? I didn't answer right away, because for the first time since this all started, I wasn't sure. And I knew with chilling clarity that whatever came next would not happen quietly. The night before the meeting, I slept in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same thing. A lunch table, a crowded cafeteria, my daughter's small figure shrinking as laughter rose around her. The words from the messages crawled along the walls of my dreams like graffiti. You people don't know when to stop. I know where you sit at lunch before someone shuts it for her. When morning finally arrived, the sky outside was a flat, colorless gray, the kind of light that made everything look washed out, like a photograph left too long in the sun. I stood at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand, staring at the stack of papers I'd prepared. Screenshots, email printouts, a copy of the district's harassment policy, with certain lines highlighted in yellow, the timeline I'd written, with dates and descriptions. The page where I'd written, in plain language, the way my daughter flinched when a notification sound went off. Behind me, footsteps approached. Do I have to go? May asked. I turned. She stood in the doorway, dressed in jeans and a faded hoodie, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Shadows bruised the skin under her eyes. They ask that you be there, I said. If you stay home, they'll say we refuse to participate. What are they going to do to me? She whispered. I walked over and cupped her face in my hands. Her skin felt too cool, her expression too guarded for 13. They're going to listen, I said, and when they don't want to, I'll make them. Her lips twitched, almost like she wanted to believe me. What if they say I'm lying? Then they can say it directly to my face, I replied. She took a breath and nodded. In the car, she stared out the window, following the passing houses with her eyes. I could tell, by the way her fingers drummed faintly on her knee, that her body was buzzing with nerves. Are you bringing everything? She asked as we stopped at a red light. I tapped the folder on the passenger seat. Every word they sent, every word they wrote back. I'm done letting them keep the story in their heads. We pulled into the visitor lot at the district office. The building was newer than the school, all sharp lines and reflective glass. A flagpole stood out front, the flag hanging limp in the still air. As we walked toward the entrance, May moved half a step behind me, as if my body could shield her from whatever waited inside. Inside, the air smelled like printer toner and artificial lemon. We signed in at the front desk. The receptionist didn't look up much, her fingers moving rapidly over her keyboard. You're here for the review meeting, she asked. Yes, I replied. Conference room B, she said, sliding visitor stickers toward us. Down the hall, second door on the right. My heart thudded against my ribs as we walked. The hallway felt too quiet. The kind of silence built into buildings where decisions are made about people who are not in the room. Conference room B had a long rectangular table, a whiteboard, and a pitcher of water with cups stacked beside it. The blinds were half closed, filtering the gray light into thin stripes on the floor. The vice principal was already there, seated near the middle of the table, flipping through some papers. The district man who'd visited my house sat beside him, looking more tired in fluorescent light than he had on my porch. A woman in a navy blazer sat at the far end, a small nameplate in front of her. Assistant Superintendent, Student Services. On the other side of the table sat the girl. Her hair was pulled into a tight braid, and she wore a pale pink sweater that made her look softer than I knew she was. Beside her sat a woman with hard eyes and lipstick too red for a Tuesday morning, the girl's mother. I recognized her from the parent forum profile picture, the same smile, the same sharp chin. As we stepped into the room, the girl's gaze flicked toward May. For a split second, satisfaction lit her eyes before it cooled into something more neutral. She quickly looked down at her lap. "Mrs. Lee," the assistant superintendent said, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm but brief. "Thank you for coming. May, thank you for being here as well." May nodded slightly, not meeting anyone's eyes. We took our seats. The chair creaked under me, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet. "I want to start by saying, we're here to support all students," the assistant superintendent began. "Our goal is to understand what has happened and to ensure a safe environment moving forward." Safe, moving forward. I'd started to hate those words. She folded her hands. "We've received serious complaints from you, Mrs. Lee, and from the other family present. We're going to walk through the events and consider the impact on all involved." The other family, of course. The girl's mother leaned forward. "We just want this over with," she said. "This whole situation has been blown up out of proportion. My daughter is not a racist." Her voice was sharp, each word clipped. "No one was born racist," I said quietly, "but your daughter sent my child messages blaming her for a virus and mocking her race. She humiliated her in the cafeteria." "I said one thing," the girl muttered, "and it wasn't even that bad." May's shoulders flinched. The assistant superintendent raised a hand. "Let's proceed one step at a time. Mrs. Lee, you mentioned prior harassment. Can you walk us through that?" I opened my folder and slid a stack of printed screenshots onto the table. The top one, I'd placed deliberately. "Did the bat taste good? Thanks a lot, you fucking freak." The words stared up from the paper like fresh bruises. "This started during lockdown," I said. "My daughter received messages like this from accounts that appeared and disappeared. She blocked them. They kept coming. We reported them to the school." The vice principal shifted in his seat. "At the time, we couldn't verify the accounts belonged to any particular student." "But you knew the content," I said. "You knew the language used." "We addressed online civility with the entire student body," he replied. "We spoke with the alleged student. She denied it." The girl folded her arms. "Because it wasn't me." I pulled out another printout. "Are you eating bat dumpling or dog noodle?" The verbatim phrasing, the same mockery. "You used this exact language in the cafeteria," I said, turning to the girl, "in front of other students. You know very well where you learned it." Her jaw tightened. It was a joke. "Racism isn't a joke," I said. Her mother bristled. "You can't accuse my daughter like that. She already apologized." "To whom?" I asked. "Not to my daughter, not to me." "We were told she would reflect on her behavior," the vice principal interjected. "Reflect." Another soft word for no consequence. The assistant superintendent cleared her throat. "We'll return to that. Mrs. Lee, you also mentioned threatening messages more recently." I nodded. "These came from an unknown number." I placed another set of printouts on the table. The texts were short, ugly, undeniable. "Tell your daughter to watch herself before someone shuts it for her. You people never learn. I know where you sit at lunch." The girl's mother sucked in a breath. "That doesn't prove anything about my daughter." "I agree," I said. "By themselves, they don't." The assistant superintendent frowned slightly, sensing something in my tone. "What do you mean?" I reached into my folder and pulled out one more sheet. This one wasn't a screenshot. It was a printout of a short email. "I filed a report with the police," I said. "I wasn't sure what they would do, but they referred me to a school resource officer who assists with online threats. I provided the number. They traced the line back to a family plan registered under a name." I stopped. Let the silence breathe. "Whose name?" the assistant superintendent asked. I looked at the girl's mother. "Yours," I said. The room went still. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The girl's eyes widened. Her mother's fingers dug into the table, knuckles whitening. "That's impossible," the mother said, her voice suddenly higher. "Anyone could have spoofed our number." It was not spoofed, I said calmly. The officer confirmed it. It's the same number listed on your emergency contact information with the school. The same number you used to register on the parent portal. I checked. She flushed. That still doesn't mean anything. My daughter doesn't even have her own phone. She borrows mine sometimes. So it came from your phone, I said. You're right. That does change something. Her mouth opened and closed. The assistant superintendent shifted in her chair. I was not aware law enforcement was already involved. I didn't have much faith in the district's internal process, I replied. I wanted there to be a record outside of your system. The girl's mother pointed a trembling finger at me. You're trying to destroy my family over some stupid texts. I'm trying to keep mine from being destroyed, I said quietly. The vice principal cleared his throat, sweat beginning to form at his hairline. Let's remain calm. We don't know who actually typed those messages. Then we can find out, I said. I reached into my purse and took out my phone. The same number that had sent those messages was saved there now, under an empty contact name. I set the phone on the table, screen facing up. What are you doing? The mother demanded. Something very simple, I said. Something you should have done months ago. I pressed the call button. The sound of the ringing filled the room, tinny and insistent. Once, twice. Across the table, a faint vibration broke the silence. The girl's mother froze. Her purse, sitting on the chair beside her, buzzed and lit up through the thin leather. I could see the screen glow faintly through the opening. The ringing continued, echoing off the conference room walls. No one said a word. After the third ring, she fumbled with the bag, grabbing the phone and flipping it over. The display was visible to everyone. Incoming call. Unknown number. The number below it matched the one on my phone. The assistant superintendent looked from the glowing screen to me, then back again. Her composure cracking just enough for me to see real shock in her eyes. The girl whispered, "Mom." I don't know how, the mother began, voice shaking. Someone must have, this is some kind of trick. I ended the call. The room sank into a heavy quiet. You can say you didn't write the messages, I said softly. If that's true, then someone in your home did. But you can't say they didn't come from your phone. Not anymore. The assistant superintendent's expression hardened in a way I hadn't seen from any administrator so far. Why were we not informed that contact information had been used to send threats? She asked, her tone directed at the vice principal and the district man. We didn't have that information, the vice principal stammered. We only knew May was upset. You knew she was being harassed, I cut in. You chose to treat it as oversensitivity. The district man shifted in his seat, his earlier quiet superiority gone. Mrs. Lee, I think we need to pause this and allow legal counsel to— No, the assistant superintendent said sharply, surprising all of us. We're going to address part of this now. She looked at me. Do you have copies of the police communication? Yes, I said, sliding the printout toward her. She read it carefully, lips thinning. The girl's mother gripped her phone like a lifeline. You don't understand, she said. Things have been hard at home. My brother was in the hospital with COVID. We were all stressed. If I sent something, it was just frustration. So you did send them, I said. She flinched. I don't remember. Maybe I was angry after hearing what your daughter said about mine. My daughter defended herself one time in a cafeteria where your daughter humiliated her for being Asian, I replied. If you were angry, I understand that. But you didn't text me as a parent. You threatened my child from the shadows. It wasn't a threat, she insisted weakly. It was just words. I stared at her for a long, steady moment. Read them out loud, I said. Her eyes darted to the papers on the table. What? Read them, I repeated. Read what you sent a 13-year-old girl. The room held its breath. Her lips trembled. I don't need to. I will then, I said. I picked up the printed page. Tell your daughter to keep her mouth shut, I read. Before someone shuts it for her, you people don't know when to stop. I know where you sit at lunch." My voice didn't shake. I made sure of it. When I finished, I lowered the paper. The silence that followed was different this time. Not the practiced quiet of administrators trying to keep control, but the stunned, raw stillness that fills a room when something ugly has finally been dragged into the light. The assistant superintendent turned to May. "I am so sorry," she said. The words sounded real, not prepackaged. "You should never have received anything like that, from anyone." May blinked, as if she couldn't quite process hearing it. Her bottom lip trembled. The girl at the other end of the table sat rigid, eyes glassy. For the first time, she looked unsettled, not bored or amused. Her gaze flicked between her mother, the papers, and my daughter. "I didn't send those texts," she whispered. "I swear." "I didn't." Her mother rounded on her. "You're not helping." "Enough," the assistant superintendent said. There was steel in her voice now. "This has gone far beyond typical peer conflict. We are no longer talking about a misunderstanding." She looked at the vice principal. Why was May told to demonstrate resilience instead of being protected? He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I spoke into the gap. "Because it was easier to ask my daughter to shrink than to ask this family to change." The line landed in the center of the table like a dropped glass. No one moved. The girl's mother glared at me. "So what now? You want my daughter expelled? You want me arrested?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of May, curled on her bedroom floor. I thought of my own father, swallowing humiliation for decades. I thought of the night messages lit up my phone with words meant to frighten us into silence. "I want accountability," I said finally. "From your daughter. From you. From this district. I want my child to walk into a school building without wondering if she'll be the punchline or the target." The assistant superintendent nodded slowly. "Disciplinary procedures will be initiated immediately," she said, her voice directed at the other side of the table, "both for the students' on-campus conduct and for the threatening messages, and this will be documented accordingly." The girl's mother shot to her feet. "You can't—" "You will have an opportunity to respond formally," the assistant superintendent interrupted. "But this is not going to be framed as equal conflict between two students any longer. That narrative ends here." The vice principal stared fixedly at a spot on the table, his earlier assuredness gone. The district man's jaw was clenched, eyes unfocused, as if already calculating damage control. For the first time since this began, I felt the balance of power shift, even if only slightly, but I knew better than to mistake a moment for a victory. "We will also be reviewing the school's response to these incidents," the assistant superintendent continued. "There appear to have been serious failures." Her gaze landed on the vice principal with a weight that made him flinch. I sat back, the adrenaline slowly fading, leaving behind a hollow ache in its place. May's hand crept toward mine under the table, her fingers curling around my own. Her skin was warm and damp, but her grip was stronger than it had been days before. The girl watched us, something like confusion flickering in her eyes. Then unexpectedly, her gaze softened, just for a heartbeat, as if she was seeing May as a person for the first time, instead of an object to aim words at. Her mother tugged her arm. "We're leaving," she snapped. "You may leave," the assistant superintendent said coldly, "but this process is not over." The woman hesitated, then gathered her purse and stormed out, the girl trailing behind her. The door shut behind them with a solid, echoing click. The room exhaled. The assistant superintendent turned back to us. "We will be in touch with next steps," she said. "In the meantime, if you want to discuss alternative arrangements for May's education, we're open to that conversation." I nodded, suddenly exhausted. "Thank you." As we stood to leave, the vice principal finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Lee," he said, "I didn't realize how bad it was." I looked at him. "You didn't want to," I replied. He flinched as if I'd struck him. We walked out of the district building into the thin midday light. The air felt different on my skin, no softer, but less suffocating. May stayed close to me, her shoulder brushing mine with every step. At the car, she paused. "Mom?" she said quietly. "When you called that number in there..." "Yes?" "I've never seen you like that." "Like what?" She thought for a moment. "Like you knew exactly what you were doing and didn't care if they liked it." I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them again. "I'm tired of asking nicely for your safety," I said. She nodded slowly. We got into the car. I started the engine. The radio came on. Some song I didn't recognize, too upbeat for the way my heart felt. I turned it off. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then May spoke again, her voice barely audible over the sound of the tires on the road. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. I looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, her eyes still wary, her shoulders still tense. "No," I said. "Not yet." Because I knew something she didn't. Systems didn't transform because of one meeting. People didn't change overnight because they'd been caught. And families like ours never truly relaxed after the first sign of justice. We waited, always, for what came next. In the days that followed the meeting, the house felt strangely still, not peaceful, just quieter in the way spaces become after something has broken and hasn't yet settled into its new shape. May stayed home while arrangements were sorted out, and each morning I found her at the kitchen table, curled over a notebook or staring into a cup of tea. She rarely finished. The district sent several follow-up emails, real ones this time. Not the templated reassurances they had been recycling for months, but language that acknowledged harm, outlined procedures, requested documentation. Someone finally called the harassment by its name. Someone finally wrote the word threat. I printed every message and placed it in a folder, adding it to the stack that had grown heavier than its weight suggested. May read one of the letters over my shoulder. "So, what does this mean for me?" she asked. "It means," I said slowly, "that someone finally listened." She nodded, though her expression remained cautious, as if she didn't quite trust the idea yet. I didn't blame her. Trust wasn't something restored easily, and it certainly wasn't something offered just because a district changed its wording. We spent the next few days in a rhythm that felt unfamiliar but necessary. She helped chop vegetables for dinner, her hands moving steadily through carrots and bok choy. I found her reading one afternoon on the couch, wrapped in her favorite blanket. In the evenings, we walked around the block together, the air crisp with early spring. Birds gathering on telephone wires, branches trembling with new buds. She didn't talk much, but she stayed beside me. That was enough. One morning, I stood in the kitchen holding the old ceramic bowl from my mother, the one with the chipped rim. The sunlight caught the crack in the glaze, illuminating its imperfection. I ran my thumb along the edge, remembering how my mother had once told me a kitchen never felt empty as long as something in it carried a memory. I set the bowl on the counter and placed a few cloves of garlic inside. The scent rose gently, familiar and grounding. May wandered in, her hair still mussed from sleep. "You're making noodles?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Your favorite." She hesitated, then smiled, the first full, unguarded smile I'd seen from her in weeks. It softened something in me I hadn't realized was still clenched. While the soup simmered, she sat on a stool by the counter. "Do you think the girl's mom will get in trouble?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "That part isn't up to us anymore." "Do you want her to?" I stirred the broth slowly. "I want them to learn something, and I want you to feel safe again. That matters more to me than punishment." She looked down at her hands. "I don't feel as scared today." "That's enough for now," I said. When the soup was ready, we ate together in the quiet kitchen. The broth was warm, the noodles soft, steam curling into the air like a gentle reminder that comfort didn't always come loudly. Sometimes it arrived in small spaces, in familiar smells, in moments that didn't demand anything from you. After lunch, I opened an email from the assistant superintendent confirming May's transition to a different school in the district, one with a better record, smaller class sizes, and administrators who wanted to meet with us before she enrolled. The letter included apologies, but more importantly, actions. May read it beside me. "Do you think it will be different?" she asked. "It won't be perfect," I said, "but it will be better." She nodded. "I can live with that." Later, as she packed a small box with her school supplies, I found one of the old handwritten notes she used to keep. Creases, worn soft from years of folding and unfolding. The ink had faded slightly. "You're stronger than you think." She held it up. "I don't remember keeping this." "I slipped those into your lunches," I reminded her. "You used to collect them." She sat on the edge of her bed, turning the note over in her fingers. "I think I needed this more now than I did then." "Maybe that's why it found its way back to you," I said. She tucked the note into the pocket of her backpack. When bedtime came, she lingered in the doorway of my room. "Good night," she said softly, and "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "You're my child." "I know," she whispered, "but still." I watched her walk down the hall, her step steady. Not fearless yet, but no longer consumed by the shadows of the last few months. After she disappeared into her room, I went back to the kitchen and picked up the ceramic bowl again. The garlic inside had begun to dry at the edges, but its scent was still strong. I held it close, breathing in the faint echo of my mother's kitchen, of all the women who had carried their children through storms without fanfare. The bowl wasn't perfect, neither was the world that waited beyond our walls, but it held its shape. It held its memory, and so did we. For the first time in a long while, I felt something almost like peace settle into the quiet spaces around me. If only for tonight, it was enough. And if tomorrow wasn't gentler, I knew now that I didn't have to meet it silently. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. There are parts of motherhood that feel too heavy until someone else sits with you for a moment. If you've carried something similar, you can share it with me. I'm listening.